The acorn landed on the porch without a sound. He almost missed it, almost wrote it off as wind, as branch drop, as the thousand small things the forest did when it wanted nothing from you. But then he saw the puppy. It was standing at the bottom of the steps, not barking, not wagging, just watching him with the kind of steady patience that animals sometimes carry and people rarely do. Its coat was the color of wet bark, dark brown, matted in patches, ribs just visible beneath the fur. It couldn't have been more than 10, maybe 12 weeks old, small enough to look misplaced in the wide open of the tree line. It looked at him. Then it turned and walked back into the trees. Marcus Hale didn't move for a long moment. He stood there on the porch of the rented cabin outside Sisters, Oregon. Coffee going cold in his hand, the late October air settling into his shoulders, and stared at the acorn sitting on the wood plank like it had been placed there deliberately. He didn't pick it up. He went inside. 18 months out of the Navy. That was where he was. 18 months since the last briefing, the last team debrief, the last time someone had needed him to be exactly somewhere at exactly a certain time and had counted on him showing up. 39 years old, 14 years as a SEAL, 2 deployments to places he still didn't name out loud, not because he wasn't allowed to, but because the names had weight he wasn't ready to carry in casual conversation. The cabin belonged to a woman named Patrice, a retired schoolteacher who had moved to Portland to be near her daughter. She rented it out quietly, no listing, just word of mouth through the veteran support network his former CO had connected him to before he separated. Just go somewhere quiet, the man had said. Stop trying to figure out what's next before you've rested. Marcus hadn't rested. He had organized the cabin instead, labeled the kitchen shelves, mapped his daily walk through the same half-mile loop each morning before the light fully came in. He cooked the same 4 meals in rotation. He slept in 4-hour increments and told himself it was preference. There was no one to tell otherwise. His sister called on Sundays. He answered. He kept the calls short, not out of coldness. He loved her, in the quiet way he loved things, at a careful distance where nothing could be taken from him. She had stopped asking when he was coming home for a visit. He hadn't been able to explain that home felt like a concept he needed to rebuild from scratch before he could walk back into it. So he stayed in the cabin, and the forest stayed around the cabin, and that was enough. The next morning, there was a pine cone on the bottom step. He saw it when he came out for his walk. Sat perfectly upright, like someone had set it there with intention. He scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. He stepped over it and kept walking. That evening, coming back from the small market in town, eggs, coffee, 2 cans of black beans, he saw the puppy again. It was at the edge of the yard, watching him come up the gravel path. Same stillness, same direct gaze. And then, as he reached the porch steps, it moved forward quickly, dropped something near his boot, and retreated again. A small, smooth river stone, pale gray, rounded on every edge. Marcus looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at the puppy, which had stopped about 10 feet away and was watching him with complete seriousness, like it was waiting for a response it hadn't yet decided to hope for. "Where did you come from?" he said. Not a question. Just words finding their way out. The puppy didn't answer. It watched him for another few seconds. Then it turned and disappeared into the low brush at the edge of the yard. He picked up the stone. He didn't know why. He put it in his jacket pocket and went inside. It came back every day after that. Not always at the same time. Sometimes morning, sometimes the gray middle of the afternoon, but always with something. A fragment of bark, pale and peeling. A small bundle of dried grass bound together in a loose knot, the kind wind made sometimes when it moved through tall stems. A broken jay feather, striped blue and black. A second stone, darker than the first. Each time, the pattern was the same. The puppy would appear at the edge of the trees. It would move toward the porch steps, careful, never rushing, and set the object down. Then it would step back and look at him. Marcus started sitting on the porch in the afternoons. He told himself it was just to get air. Told himself it had nothing to do with the animal, or its peculiar, deliberate arrivals. But he started bringing his coffee outside, instead of drinking it at the kitchen counter. He started finishing it there too, instead of going back in after a few minutes the way he usually did. The puppy never came closer than the bottom step. He never reached toward it, but something was shifting between them. Slow, almost imperceptible, the way temperature changes before you actually feel cold. There was a woman named Dara who ran the small feed and supply store at the edge of town. She had a broad, unhurried manner and a habit of knowing more about the surrounding area than she ever seemed to let on. Marcus had stopped in twice for bird seed. Patrice had left a feeder he felt obligated to maintain. And both times, Dara had offered information he hadn't asked for with the ease of someone who simply couldn't help being useful. On his third visit, he described the puppy. Dara didn't hesitate. "Sounds like the Haverhill litter," she said, setting a bag of suet on the counter. "Somebody dumped a pregnant dog up off Route 20 about 4 months back. A few of the pups found homes through the rescue, but one of them kept getting returned. Twice." She looked at him steadily. "Some dogs don't settle easy. Too watchful. People think they want a dog, but they don't actually want to be watched that close." She picked up his card without further commentary and ran it. He drove back to the cabin. The puppy was on the porch, not at the bottom step. On the porch itself, sitting near the door, a small piece of broken ceramic tile, set carefully beside its front paw. The tile was pale blue, old, probably from some long-gone garden border, somewhere deep in the trees. The puppy looked at him and didn't run. Marcus stood at the bottom of the steps for a moment. His chest was doing something he didn't have a word for. Not quite tight, not quite open. Something in between. He climbed the steps slowly, sat down in the old wooden chair a few feet from where the puppy sat. Neither of them moved. "The wind came through the pines twice," Marcus said quietly. The puppy exhaled, a long, slow breath through its nose, the kind that meant settled. Then it lay down, resting its chin on its front paws, its eyes staying on him. He stayed outside until the light was gone. He named it Rook, not a decision he'd planned or announced. It came out one morning when he opened the door, and the puppy was there again, waiting, with a small twist of wire it must have found in the brush somewhere. "Morning, Rook," he said. He'd been a chess player as a kid. His father had taught him. The rook, his father always said, was the most underestimated piece on the board. Didn't move the way people expected. Didn't announce itself. Just held the line. He started leaving water on the porch. Then food, just a portion of plain chicken he cooked extra of. Then a folded blanket near the door. Rook never asked for any of it, but Rook accepted all of it, in the same measured, deliberate way it offered its small gifts. Like the exchange was fair, like something understood was operating between them that didn't require negotiation. The gifts kept coming. A piece of glass worn smooth by weather, a crow's tail feather, a small flat piece of wood with a shape that looked almost like a handprint if you held it right. Marcus put them on the windowsill above the kitchen sink, a line of small things that didn't add up to anything, except the fact that they kept appearing. He started sleeping through the night. He didn't notice for almost a week. His sister called on a Sunday in November, and he talked longer than usual, not about anything particular, about the pines, about the cold coming in, about how quiet the mornings were, but how it had started to feel like a different kind of quiet than it had before. She didn't ask what had changed. She was smart enough to just let him talk. When he hung up, Rook was sitting by his knee. He reached down and put his hand on the dog's head, carefully, the way He'd been doing things lately, not pulling back, but not gripping either, just present. Rook didn't pull away. Marcus stayed there for a while, his hand on the dog's head, the cabin quiet around them, the last of the daylight going gold through the window. The windowsill caught it. The stone, the feathers, the worn glass, the small wooden piece that looked almost like a hand. All of it lit up for a moment in that particular late afternoon, way that made ordinary things look like they'd been arranged on purpose. He thought about purpose, about the years he'd spent operating inside a structure where every action had one, about how lost he'd felt inside the absence of it, about how he'd confused the quiet with emptiness, instead of understanding that sometimes quiet was the first necessary condition. He hadn't needed saving. He'd needed to be approached slowly, from the edge of the trees by something small enough to seem unthreatening. Something that didn't demand, didn't explain, just kept showing up with whatever it had found, kept returning, kept choosing him. He scratched behind Rook's ear. The dog closed its eyes. Some things don't announce themselves. They come in low and careful from the tree line. Set something small at the bottom of your steps, and wait to see if you'll look down. They ask nothing. They bring what they have. They come back. And if you sit still long enough, if you stop filling the silence with the noise of what you've lost, you start to notice that something has been placed beside you. Something that didn't need you to be whole to find you worth finding. Marcus didn't know, that first afternoon, that he'd been waiting. He would have said he wasn't waiting for anything at all. But Rook knew. That's the thing about the ones who keep showing up. They usually do.